attack. Yeah, don't blink. I'm a straight glass of whiskey, you're an umbrella pretty drink. Hardcore bleeding red, white, and blue. Walk tall like Sheriff Buford and that whole damn crew.
Hey everybody, I'm here with a video today to explain why I used to be so against things like these. Very, very strongly anti-gun. And now I've switched to become pro-gun, pro-2A. Why would that be? I'm 54 years old, so I've had a long lifetime of being very, very strongly anti-gun. And I think growing up in New York, which is in close to the city, an area where people don't really have that many guns, is part of it. Also, my ignorance about guns. So all those years I was very, very strongly anti-gun, and I can't tell you where I got this from, whether it was a school teacher or an article, possibly a relative. I don't know where I got this from, but I was under the notion that basically for every, say, 1,000 guns in homes, it was, 400 or 500 suicides, 300, husbands and wives shooting each other, 95 accidents where kids get guns and shoot each other, and then maybe, one case of self-defense use of a gun. And also, so I thought guns bring nothing but pain and death on society. Even to the people who want to protect their homes, all they do is end up shooting each other. So why would you ever have guns? I was one of those people, admittedly. I thought AR stood for assault rifle. I didn't know that AR meant Armalite. So I was totally ignorant. And I was surrounded by people who were also strongly anti-gun. And also none of them knew anything about guns either. So it's very interesting that a lot of people, I'm sure, if some of you watching this hopefully are anti-gun people, be open-minded, because if you were like me, if you were anti-gun but know nothing about guns, it's kind of an odd position to have. You should be, if you're going to be against something, you should at least be educated about it and understand it. So if you're going to be against it, you can be against it intelligently. So with the, what happened to me, why am I now pro-gun? Why am I holding this? That whole time, not only was I ignorant of guns, I guess I lived in some kind of bubble, and maybe we all did for the most part, where we assumed certain things that may not be true. For instance, I always thought anyone who had guns, had a lot of ammo, stored up food and water, what we call a prepper, was insane. I'll admit it. 5 years ago, if you asked me about someone who collected guns, collected ammo, and food and water, I'd say, yeah, nut job. What are they waiting for? The Walking Dead? Like, we're in a society where society is not going to break down. We're not going to go to war. Like, there's nothing out there that could cause the collapse of our society. There's no reason to ever need a gun except possibly home defense. And the area where I'm in, there's no home invasions really, or there weren't at the time. And I thought having a gun is just goofy, unless maybe you live out in, way out in the middle of nowhere and you really feel you need some protection. So what changed for me? Well, life changed. The first thing is, COVID. COVID didn't collapse our society also. But at the same time, it was a very mild disease if you think about it. I mean, in terms of percentages. And look, I've had family members who died of COVID, so I'm not trying to downplay that, except that in terms of historical diseases that were bad, COVID's a nothing. And COVID almost broke our society down, right? You see how bad it got. Imagine if COVID had been 20 or 30 times worse, if it killed 10 or 15% of the population. I actually think society would have broken down. I think people would have been out there eating each other. So that was the first assumption I had in my life that got shook. When I thought nothing could break our society, I do now think a bad enough disease could do it. What are the odds of that? Probably low, but better that you're prepared than you're not, right? Second thing was, I never thought in this country that we could either have some type of civil war or some type of, tyrannical government. I always used to laugh again, like I laughed at preppers. I laughed at the notion that you would ever need to fight your own government or that there could ever be a civil war in this country. When we look at the events over the last few years, things are so polarized in this country, and the extreme left and the extreme right are both insane and both want violence. So again, I think it's a very, very low probability that something happens, but I no longer think it's impossible. I used to think it was impossible. So I don't think that's impossible anymore. And just even, I think it was Hurricane Katrina a few years ago, in my super civilized luxury neighborhood that I live in, I saw people fighting at the gas pump. when gas got short because of that hurricane. We didn't get gas deliveries, I think, for a week or two, and people were literally fighting at the pump in my ritzy neighborhood. What if they needed food for their children instead? So you have to, that kind of woke me up a little bit. And then on top of that, someone came on my property and stole my car. Now, they didn't break into my house. They didn't assault me. They didn't assault my wife or my children. But they did come on my property and take my car, something I never thought would happen. Now, you could say, and I know some Hollywood people have poo-pooed some stuff like this, like, oh, it's just car theft, like, who cares, big deal. And I agree in the fact that they only took a car. And I agree that most car thieves seem to only be intent on stealing cars, not breaking into your house. But those are bad people. They know other bad people. They got my wallet, right? They have family pictures. They know that I have a pretty wife. They know that I have a beautiful daughter. How do I know that the guys who don't normally break into houses do anything that bad, quote unquote that bad, because they only steal your car? What if they show that stuff to one of their friends and their friends say, oh, I'm going to go to that house. I'm going to go get that wife. I'm going to go get that daughter. I'm going to home invade. Look, it happens. Home invasions. You see it on the news. It's not something that never happens. So now that my property has been violated, that people have come on my property to steal my property, I now actually have to be worried that they might come back to come inside the house. And police are great, but they're only going to show up if my home gets invaded and we get killed. They're not going to be there for the home invasion. Only I'm going to be here if that happens. So I need to be able to protect my family. So a lot of my assumptions, a lot of things I really thought were just totally out of the realm of possibility, I now think are in the realm of possibility. And no, I'm not being paranoid. I don't think all these things are going to happen. Hopefully none of them will happen. But it is much better to have a gun and never need to use it than to need the gun and not have it. And then on top of that, the last thing recently, of course, is Ukraine. If all those Ukrainian citizens were armed and trained in arms, they'd be better off. As it is, they handed out guns to everybody. Any citizen who wanted a gun, even they didn't know how to use them, they got guns. You're better off with an armed, trained population than not. Because the last thing I'll say is, and again, I think it's 1 in a million, but I never thought another country could make war on our country. But I'm sure the Ukrainians 2 months ago thought they would never need guns either. So you don't know. And because there's the unknown, what's the harm in being prepared? People who are anti-gun like I was say, oh, more guns, more violence, whatever. You have to think of something. There's over 400 million guns in this country. 400 million, think about that. 400 million guns. Over 80 million people who own guns. And yet, if you compare that to the number of violence each year, the number of murders by gun, that number is actually a tiny little percentage, given the size of those other numbers. There's only 300,000 cars causes way more death. 300 million cars causes way more death each year than 400 million guns does. Okay, think about that. Cars, of which there are less of, cause more death than guns, which there are way more of. It's just something to think about. Anyway, hope you enjoyed understanding why I went from being staunchly anti-gun out of ignorance, and I'm going to dive into a lot more statistics to break down even further why I became pro-gun. The more I looked at statistics, the more pro-gun I became, actually. So stay tuned. I have a lot more videos diving into statistics and further explaining why I now believe guns are good. Thanks. Stay safe out there.